Whitney Houston stopped mid-concert and ran backstage. What she found there left 15,000 people in stunned silence. I was standing in the wings of Madison Square Garden on March 8, 1994, when Whitney Houston did something I'd never seen any performer do in my 20 years working concert security. She stopped singing in the middle of "I Will Always Love You." The music kept playing. The band was still going, but Whitney's voice had gone silent, and 15,000 people were holding their breath, trying to understand what was happening. Then she did something even more shocking. She dropped the microphone on the stage floor, the thud echoing through the arena's sound system, and she started running, not walking, running, in her heels and that stunning silver gown. She ran straight toward where I was standing in the wings. My name is Marcus Webb, and I was the backstage security coordinator for Whitney's 1994 North American tour. I'd worked with everyone from Michael Jackson to Madonna, but nobody affected me the way Whitney did. She had this presence, this light that seemed to make everyone around her want to be better. That night at Madison Square Garden was supposed to be the crowning moment of the tour. It was a homecoming of sorts, performing in New York, where she'd built so much of her career. The energy in the arena had been electric from the moment she walked on stage. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about what led to that moment. Because what happened that night started 3 hours before Whitney ever stepped on stage. It was 6:11 p.m. when I noticed her. A young girl, maybe 16 or 17 years old, was sitting on the floor in the backstage hallway near the dressing rooms. She was wearing jeans that were too big for her thin frame and a faded Whitney Houston t-shirt that looked like it had been washed 1,000 times. Her dark hair hung in front of her face, and she was crying quietly, the kind of crying where you're trying not to make any noise because you don't want anyone to notice you. Now, backstage at a major concert venue, you see a lot of things: lost crew members, overwhelmed reporters, occasionally fans who've somehow slipped past security. But this girl was different. There was something about the way she sat there, so small and broken, that made me stop. "Hey," I said gently, approaching her slowly. "You okay? Are you supposed to be back here?" She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes that told me she'd been crying for a lot longer than just a few minutes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll leave. I just needed somewhere quiet." I should have escorted her out immediately. That was protocol. But something in her eyes stopped me. It was a look I'd seen before, in my own daughter's eyes when she was going through her darkest times. It was the look of someone who'd given up hope. "What's your name?" I asked instead. "Sarah," she said quietly. "Sarah Mitchell. Are you here for the concert, Sarah?" She nodded, then shook her head, then started crying harder. I had a ticket. My foster mom saved up for 6 months to buy it for me. She knew how much I loved Whitney. But I can't go in there." "Why not?" Sarah looked down at her hands, which were shaking. "Because I don't deserve it. I don't deserve anything good." Over the next 20 minutes, Sarah told me her story. She'd been in foster care since she was 8 years old, when her mother died of cancer and her father couldn't handle being a single parent. She'd been in 7 different homes in 9 years. Each one promised to be different, but each one ended the same way, with her being sent somewhere else. 3 months ago, she'd been placed with a woman named Mrs. Patricia Henderson, who Sarah described as the first person who actually seemed to see me. Mrs. Henderson was a widow who'd been fostering kids for 15 years. She'd noticed that Sarah's room was covered with Whitney Houston posters, and that she played Whitney's songs on repeat every night. "Why Whitney?" Mrs. Henderson had asked her. Sarah had answered honestly, "Because when I listen to her sing, I don't feel alone. Her voice makes me believe that somewhere, someone understands what it feels like to hurt." Mrs. Henderson had started saving immediately for concert tickets. She worked double shifts at the diner, where she was a waitress, putting aside every extra dollar. When she finally had enough, she bought 2 tickets, one for Sarah and one for herself. But then, 2 weeks before the concert, Sarah had done something she deeply regretted. She'd gotten into a fight at school with a girl who'd made fun of her for being in foster care. Sarah had pushed her, and the girl had fallen and broken her wrist. Sarah was suspended for 2 weeks and faced possible charges. Mrs. Henderson had been called to the principal's office. Sarah had sat there waiting for the same conversation she'd heard 7 times before. The one that ended with "I don't think this is working out." But Mrs. Henderson had surprised her. Instead of anger, she'd shown disappointment, which somehow hurt worse. "Sarah, I know you're hurting. I know life hasn't been fair to you. But hurting other people won't heal your pain." Then Mrs. Henderson had done something that broke Sarah completely. She'd hugged her. Nobody had hugged Sarah in 9 years. Not like that. Not with the kind of love that says, "I'm not giving up on you." "We're still going to that concert," Mrs. Henderson had said, "because I made you a promise, and I keep my promises." But tonight, as Sarah sat in the backstage hallway telling me this story, Mrs. Henderson wasn't there. She'd been rushed to the hospital 3 hours earlier, with what the doctors thought was a heart attack. Sarah had insisted on coming to the concert anyway, not wanting to waste the tickets Mrs. Henderson had worked so hard to buy. "But I can't go in there," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't sit in that seat knowing she's in the hospital. I can't listen to Whitney sing about love and hope when I might lose the only person who ever really cared about me. I came here because I didn't know where else to go. I didn't know what to say. I'm a security guard, not a counselor. But something about this kid's story got to me." "Have you called the hospital?" "They won't tell me anything because I'm not family. Mrs. Henderson's daughter is flying in from California, but she won't be there for another few hours. I made a decision that probably should have gotten me fired. Stay here," I told her. "I'm going to see what I can find out." I went to the venue's medical office and convinced the nurse there to call the hospital. It took some explaining, but they finally agreed to give us an update on Mrs. Henderson's condition. The news was cautiously positive. It hadn't been a heart attack, but a severe anxiety episode. She was stable and resting. When I returned to tell Sarah, I found her in the same spot. But now she was humming. Very quietly, almost to herself, she was humming, "I will always love you." And her voice, even humming, was absolutely beautiful. "She's okay," I told Sarah. "They're keeping her overnight for observation, but she's going to be fine." Sarah's face transformed. The relief was so profound that she started crying again. But this time with joy. "Really? She's really okay? Really? Now come on. The concert's about to start. Let's get you to your seat." But Sarah shook her head. "I can't go out there looking like this. My eyes are all puffy. And I've been crying. Trust me. Half the people in that arena are going to be crying once Whitney starts singing." I walked Sarah to her seat, which was in the lower bowl, about 15 rows from the stage. Mrs. Henderson had gotten great tickets. As I was leaving, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for checking on Mrs. Henderson, but for listening. Nobody ever really listens." I nodded and headed back to my post in the wings. The lights went down. The crowd erupted, and Whitney took the stage in that stunning silver gown that caught every spotlight like she was made of stardust. For the first hour, everything was perfect. Whitney was in incredible form, her voice strong and emotional. She'd already performed Greatest Love of All, How Will I Know, and I Wanna Dance with Somebody. The crowd was ecstatic, on their feet, singing along to every word. Then she started, "I Will Always Love You." This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. This was Whitney's signature song, the one that had defined her career. The arena went from chaotic to reverent in seconds. People swayed with their lighters held high. Some were already crying. Whitney closed her eyes and began singing. Her voice soared through that opening verse, with a vulnerability that made even the people working backstage stop what they were doing to listen. But then something happened. As Whitney approached the second verse, I noticed her eyes scanning the crowd. This wasn't unusual. Whitney often made eye contact with audience members, making them feel seen. But this time her gaze stopped on something, or someone. She kept singing, but I could see her attention was fixed on a specific spot in the lower bowl, right where I'd left Sarah sitting. The music built toward that iconic key change. The moment where Whitney's voice would climb to that impossible note that gave everyone goosebumps. But she never got there. She stopped singing. The band kept playing, confused about what to do. The entire arena seemed to take a collective breath, wondering if something was wrong with her voice, if she was sick, if there was a technical problem. Then, Whitney did something that shocked everyone. She dropped the microphone on the stage floor, creating a loud thud that echoed through the speakers, and she started running. She ran straight toward the wings where I was standing, her heels clicking rapidly on the stage floor. Her face had an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of concern and determination. "Where is she?" Whitney asked me urgently. As she reached the wings, the girl who was crying, the one in foster care. "Where is she?" I stood there frozen, unable to process how Whitney could possibly know about Sarah. "Marcus, please," Whitney said, and I realized with a shock that she knew my name. I saw her in the audience. She's still crying, but these aren't normal tears. Something's wrong. I can feel it. "Where was she when you found her?" I pointed down the hallway, back near the dressing rooms. "But how did you—" Whitney was already running in that direction, leaving me and 15,000 confused people in her wake. I followed her, calling out, "She's in the audience now, seat L15. But Whitney had already figured out where Sarah was sitting. What I didn't understand was why she'd run backstage instead of going to the girl directly from the stage. When we reached the area where I'd found Sarah earlier, Whitney stopped. She was looking at the floor where Sarah had been sitting. There, barely visible, was a small piece of paper. Whitney picked it up, and I saw her hands start to shake as she read it. "Oh God," Whitney whispered. "Oh God, no." She thrust the paper into my hands and started running back toward the stage. I looked down at what she'd given me. It was a suicide note. The handwriting was shaky. The words heartbreaking. "To whoever finds this, I'm sorry. I tried to be strong, but I can't do it anymore. Mrs. Henderson deserves better than a broken girl who only causes problems. Please tell her I'm grateful for everything she tried to do. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't worth saving. By the time anyone reads this, I'll be gone. Tell her not to blame herself. Some people are just too broken to fix." My blood ran cold. I grabbed my radio and started calling for security at Sarah's seat location. But Whitney was already ahead of me. She'd run back on stage, grabbed the microphone, and the most extraordinary thing happened. The music had stopped completely by now. The confused band members were looking at each other. The audience was murmuring, worried, confused. Some people were starting to get their phones out. "Ladies and gentlemen," Whitney's voice came through the speakers, breathless from running but steady with purpose. "I need your help. Right now. This is not part of the show, this is real." The arena went completely silent. There is a young woman in section in row 15. Her name is Sarah. She's wearing a Whitney Houston t-shirt. If you're near her, I need you to make sure she doesn't leave. Please, it's a matter of life and death." The crowd erupted in confused chatter. People in that section were looking around, trying to spot who Whitney was talking about. "Sarah," Whitney said, her voice now filled with emotion that silenced the entire arena. "If you can hear me, please, please don't leave. I saw you. I saw your pain. And I need you to know something. Whitney was crying now, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking but still powerful. You are not broken. You are not too damaged to be loved. I know what you're thinking right now, because I've thought those same thoughts. I've looked in the mirror and seen someone I didn't think deserved to be saved. But you know what I learned? The people who love us don't love us because we're perfect. They love us because we're us, broken pieces and all. The cameras in the arena found Sarah. She was standing now, looking up at Whitney, with tears pouring down her face. Security guards had reached her row, but they weren't restraining her. They were just there, present, ready to help if needed. Mrs. Henderson is going to be okay. Whitney continued, somehow knowing that was part of Sarah's pain, and she wants you to be okay too. She didn't save up for 6 months to buy these tickets, because she felt obligated. She did it because she loves you. Real, unconditional love, the kind of love that doesn't give up. Whitney gestured for Sarah to come to the stage. Please, come up here. Let me show you something. Security helped Sarah make her way through the crowd toward the stage. People were openly crying now, not just Sarah, but hundreds of people throughout the arena who could feel the raw emotion of this moment. When Sarah reached the stage, Whitney came down the stairs and met her. She wrapped Sarah in a hug, and that's when Sarah completely broke down. She collapsed into Whitney's arms, sobbing, releasing 9 years of pain and loneliness and fear. Whitney held her, rocking her gently, whispering things that the microphone didn't pick up. Personal things, real things. One broken person holding another broken person, showing her that broken doesn't mean worthless. After several minutes, Whitney helped Sarah walk up the stage stairs. The band had brought out a stool, and Whitney sat Sarah down on it. Ladies and gentlemen, Whitney said, her arm around Sarah's shoulders, this is Sarah Mitchell. She's 17 years old, and she's in foster care. She's been through things that no kid should ever have to go through. And tonight she came to this concert, carrying a pain so heavy that she thought the only way to put it down was to give up on life. The arena was completely silent except for the sound of people crying. But Sarah, Whitney said, looking directly at her, you are stronger than you know. You survived. Every day that you wake up and choose to keep going, even when it hurts, even when you feel alone, you are showing a courage that most people will never understand. You are a warrior. Whitney turned back to the audience. How many of you out there have ever felt like Sarah? Like you're too broken to be fixed? Like nobody really sees you? Thousands of hands went up throughout the arena. Tough-looking men, teenage girls, elderly women, businessmen in suits. The pain was universal. That's why we're here, Whitney said. That's why music matters. Because it reminds us that we're not alone. That someone somewhere understands. That our pain is valid, but it doesn't have to be permanent. Whitney picked up her microphone and handed her spare mic to Sarah. Sarah, earlier tonight someone told me you were humming this song. Would you sing it with me? Would you show all these people the beautiful voice that you've been hiding? Sarah looked terrified. I can't. I'm not. I'm not good enough. That's the lie, Whitney said firmly. That's the lie that pain tells us. That we're not good enough, not worthy, not valuable. But it's a lie, Sarah. Your voice matters. Your life matters. And these people need to hear you sing. What happened next will stay with me for the rest of my life. Whitney started singing, I Will Always Love You Again, from the beginning. And slowly, so quietly at first, that you could barely hear it. Sarah started singing with her, but as the song progressed, Sarah's voice grew stronger, and it was absolutely beautiful. Clear, pure, filled with emotion that only comes from real pain and real survival. She wasn't technically perfect like Whitney, but there was something in her voice that was perhaps even more powerful. It was honest. It was raw. It was the sound of someone choosing life in real time. When they reached that iconic key change, Whitney let Sarah attempt it. Sarah's voice cracked a little, but she hit the note, and when she did, 15,000 people erupted in applause and cheers, so loud that it shook the building. Sarah looked out at the arena in shock, unable to process that all these people were cheering for her. For her. The girl who thought she wasn't worth saving. Whitney pulled Sarah into another hug and said into the microphone, "This is the real power of music. Not the fame, not the awards, not the money. This moment right here, when music reminds someone that they're not alone, that they're seen, that they're loved." As the applause continued, Whitney made an announcement that surprised everyone, including her own management. "Sarah, I want you to know something. Tomorrow, I'm going to visit Mrs. Henderson in the hospital, and I'm bringing you with me. And then, if you're willing, I want to help you. I want to connect you with people who can make sure you get the support you need. Therapy, education, whatever it takes, because your story doesn't end tonight in darkness. It starts tonight in light." Whitney looked out at the audience. "And I want to ask all of you for something. If you've ever thought about fostering a child, please consider it. Kids like Sarah need families who won't give up on them. And if you can't foster, support organizations that help kids in the foster care system, because every child deserves to know they're worth fighting for." The concert continued after that. But it was different. Whitney sang with a passion and purpose that elevated every song, and Sarah stayed on stage for the rest of the show, sitting on that stool in the wings where she could watch, where she could feel the love of 15,000 strangers who now knew her story. After the concert, while Whitney was meeting with her managers and team, I sat with Sarah. She was in shock, processing everything that had happened. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "How did she know? How did Whitney know what I was planning?" I thought about that. About how Whitney had been scanning the audience during "I Will Always Love You." About how she'd somehow seen through Sarah's tears to the deeper pain underneath. "I think," I said carefully, "that Whitney understands that kind of pain because she's felt it too. I think she saw in you what she's felt in herself, and she couldn't let you disappear into that darkness without fighting for you." Sarah nodded, tears falling again, but different tears now. "Nobody's ever fought for me like that. Not in front of all those people." "Well, now 15,000 people know your name and your story," I said. "That's 15,000 people who want you to keep living. That's 15,000 reasons to stay." The next day, I heard that Whitney made good on her promise. She visited Mrs. Henderson in the hospital, bringing Sarah with her. Mrs. Henderson cried when she saw Sarah, holding her tight and telling her over and over that she loved her, that she wasn't giving up, that they were family now. Whitney spent 2 hours with them, sharing her own struggles with feeling inadequate and unworthy. She talked about the pressure of fame, the difficulty of trusting people, the time she'd felt so alone that she questioned everything. "The difference between us and people who don't understand," Whitney told Sarah, "is not that our pain is worse, it's that we haven't learned yet that pain is part of being human. Everyone hurts, Sarah, but not everyone survives it. You're a survivor. Don't give up now." Whitney set up a trust fund for Sarah's education and connected her with a therapist who specialized in trauma. But more importantly, she stayed in touch. Phone calls, letters, occasional visits when her schedule allowed. Sarah stayed with Mrs. Henderson and thrived. She graduated high school with honors and got a scholarship to study social work, wanting to help other kids who felt as lost as she once had. Years later, Sarah gave an interview about that night. She said, "Whitney saved my life. Yes. But it wasn't just by stopping her show. It was by showing me that my pain had a purpose, that by surviving it and sharing it, I could help other people survive theirs." She taught me that broken crayons still color. As for me, I left concert security a few years after that night. I couldn't look at my job the same way anymore. I'd spent 20 years seeing thousands of people pass through venues, treating them as crowd management problems rather than as individual human beings with their own stories. That night taught me that sometimes the most important thing we can do is stop. Stop what we're doing. Stop what we've planned. Stop following the protocol. And pay attention to the person in front of us who needs help. Whitney could have ignored her instinct that night. She could have finished the song, completed the show, dealt with Sarah afterward privately. After all, she had 15,000 other fans who'd paid to see her perform. Instead, she chose compassion over convention. She chose to see one person's pain as more important than maintaining the illusion of a perfect show. She chose humanity over entertainment. And in doing so, she didn't just save Sarah's life. She showed 15,000 people what real strength looks like. It's not in the perfect performance or the flawless execution. It's in the willingness to be vulnerable, to acknowledge pain, to stop everything and say, you matter, your life matters. And I'm not going to pretend I don't see you hurting. Today, Sarah Mitchell runs a nonprofit organization called Broken Crayons that provides support services to teenagers in foster care. The organization's motto, taken from what Whitney told her that night, is "Broken pieces still make beautiful art." Every year on March 8th, the anniversary of that concert, Sarah holds a memorial event where foster kids and former foster kids come together to share their stories and support each other. And every year she plays a recording of Whitney singing "I Will Always Love You" and talks about the night that changed everything. The story of Whitney and Sarah reminds us that we never know who's in our audience, literal or metaphorical. We never know who's barely hanging on, who's fighting battles we can't see, who needs someone to stop and say, I see you, you matter. Whitney stopped her show for Sarah Mitchell. But really, Sarah saved Whitney's show by reminding her and all of us what performing is really about. It's not about the perfect notes or the standing ovations or the reviews. It's about the connection between human beings. It's about using whatever platform we have to make someone else's life worth living. And sometimes, if we're very lucky and very brave, it's about stopping everything to show one broken teenager that she's worth saving, that her voice matters, and that the world is better with her in it. If this story moved you, remember that somewhere near you, someone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Maybe today is the day you stop and pay attention. Maybe today you save someone's life just by letting them know they're seen. Because that's what Whitney taught us. That sometimes the greatest thing we can do is stop the show and be human together.